The subcommittee will come to order. Apologize for everyone for being late. We just left the Vice President giving a briefing on the coronavirus issue to Democratic Caucus. But we'll get underway. I want to welcome everyone to today's hearing on the fiscal year 2021 budget request for military operations in cyberspace. I'd first of all like to welcome our witnesses here today. Mr. Kenneth Rapuano serves as both the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Global Security, and as the Principal Cyber Advisor to the Secretary of Defense. Prior to returning to government service, Mr. Rapuano worked for federally funded research and development corporations focusing on Homeland Security and counterterrorism issues. Mr. Rapuano, welcome back. Next, General Paul Nakasone serves in 3 capacities concurrently: Commander, U.S. Cyber Command, also Director of the National Security Agency, and Chief of the Central Security Service. Before his current role, he commanded U.S. Army Cyber Command and has served as a career intelligence officer through his 33 years in uniform. General Nakasone, thank you for your service, and thank you to the nation, and we're pleased to have you back before the subcommittee once again. So the Department of Defense created U.S. Cyber Command in 2009, and more than 10 years later, we are still working diligently on establishing the foundations, concepts, doctrine, training, and metrics needed to ensure the security of the nation in the cyberspace domain. The state of cyber and national defense is more central than ever, and 2020 marks a sea change, with cyber firmly established and accepted as a warfighting domain, capability, and asset. This is highlighted best through the current operational posture and institutional maturation of Cybercom. Over the course of 2020, this subcommittee expects the command to aggressively address issues of readiness, operational tempo, and the defense of the nation's electoral system, among other things. This subcommittee has worked to ensure that the Department, the military services, and Cybercom are equipped with the tools and authorities necessary to achieve their objectives. In the FY2020 NDAA, we granted new authorities to Cybercom and bolstered multiple frameworks for legislative oversight. We seek to balance an appropriate degree of oversight while ensuring the command retains operational flexibility. We will continue this trend through our collective work in the 2021 bill. Cybercom is facing possibly the most challenging year in its existence. General Nakasone, your command sits at the center of the Department's efforts to secure the information environment. The United States faces increasing malicious activity from Russia, Iran, China, and others. We know about how Russia weaponized information during the 2016 elections, and we must do more to anticipate and counter these sophisticated operations. While we have had some success countering Russia's malign influence campaigns in 2018, we must not let our guard down. We must ensure that we are properly organized within the Department of Defense and coordinating across the United States government. I hope you'll give us a full assessment of your efforts to protect the country from malign cyber activity. I will be particularly interested to hear how you're working with partners in the interagency to promote a more stable cyberspace and protect our allies' critical infrastructure. I want to hear specifically how you are coordinating and deconflicting activities domestically with the Department of Homeland Security and internationally with the Department of State. I'm also interested to hear from our witnesses about their assessment of Cybercom's current force structure. For the past year, I have had the privilege of serving on the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, and I want to thank you in particular, Mr. Rapuano, for your many contributions to our work. One of the areas of focus of the Commission has been whether Cybercom's force structure properly reflects the command's operational aspirations. Essentially, we need to candidly assess whether a force conceived more than 7 years ago is sufficient for a dramatically different environment today. I will also be curious to hear candid assessments on how organic capabilities resident in the services are rationalized with Cybercom's mission and strategy. Throughout our nation's history, our military has grown accustomed to focusing on the offensive systems, forces, and platforms that deliver effects against our adversaries. Given our geographic advantage of 2 oceans and our history of primarily fighting overseas, we are conditioned to fight offensively. However, in a connected world with an estimable number of Internet-connected device, networks, vehicles, and systems, our defensive posture in the cyber domain has never been more critical. So, while I fully support Cybercom's more offensively postured construct, I'm concerned that the President's FY21 cyber budget signals in select places that we can sacrifice defensive programs and investments in favor of investments in offensive cyber systems and programs. So I hope that the witnesses will speak candidly about balancing resources to ensure the Department is best postured to protect the United States in cyberspace, whether through defensive or offensive missions. So with that, I want to thank our witnesses for appearing before us today. I thank you for all that you're doing on behalf of the country to keep all of us safe. As a reminder, after this open session, we'll move to room 2337 for a closed member-only session. With that, I'll now turn to Ranking Member Stefanik for her remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Langevin. Secretary Rapuano and General Nakasone, welcome back to this committee. We are now 2 years removed from U.S. Cyber Command reaching full operational capability. In that time, we have witnessed several significant achievements with tangible operational results. These included the interagency efforts with the Russia Small Group and Operation Synthetic Theology, and also the development and implementation of a strategy that emphasizes continuous engagement, hunting our adversaries forward, and reasserting deterrence in cyberspace. During this time, we have seen our adversaries adapt, blending cyber and information warfare to form an operational continuum that continues to challenge us in the digital realm. What worked for our cyber forces in helping to secure our 2018 midterm elections will not necessarily guarantee our security moving forward. We must acknowledge the creativity of our adversaries and continue to adapt our playbook. We must ensure that election security is a continuous, sustained effort, 365 days a year. There has been significant progress within the Cyber Mission Force over the past year. Specifically, the understanding and categorizing of specific cyber operations forces, the delegation of important operational authorities, the establishment of cyber peculiar capability development, and the understanding of cyber vulnerabilities within our own installations and weapons system. We have made headway to mature our cyber forces, but much work lies ahead. I am interested in hearing what we have learned about the operational needs of the Cyber Mission Force. Are we organized with the appropriate skill sets, number of personnel, and force structure to meet the future needs of the nation? As we reevaluate our cyber posture, these findings will be critical to ensuring we align the appropriate resources, policy, and authorities to the Cyber Mission Force to stay ahead of our adversaries and reaffirm the notion of deterrence in cyberspace. With that, I yield back, and thank you again to our witnesses.
Thank the ranking member. Before I recognize Secretary Rapuano, is this on? Okay. Before I recognize Secretary Rapuano, I want to briefly note to our witnesses that the cumulative cyber budget has not been made available to Congress or the American people. The President's budget was formally delivered nearly a month ago, and we're still waiting for the congressionally mandated budget documents for cyberspace operations. Secretary Rapuano, I'm also disheartened that even your opening statement relied only on top-line figures for cyberspace operations. So I hope that the numbers are going to be forwarded to Congress imminently. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Secretary Rapuano. You are now recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Langevin, Ranking Member Stefanik, and members of the committee. I'm pleased to be here today with General Nakasone, Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, to report on the progress of the Department of Defense has made over the past year implementing the 2018 DoD Cyber Strategy and working towards the Department's core objectives in cyberspace. The 2018 DoD Cyber Strategy prioritizes the challenge of great power competition and recognizes that the Department must defend forward to counter our competitors' long-term coordinated campaigns of malicious activity to gain political, economic, and military advantage. The strategy normalizes the Department's efforts in the cyberspace domain, integrating cyberspace operations into military operations across all physical domains, and reinforces the need to prevent or degrade threats before they harm U.S. national interests. Our new approach to competition in cyberspace is enabled by the new presidential policy on cyberspace operations. Thank you also to Congress for legislation which clarified the cyberspace operations are traditional military activities. Taken together, these changes have advanced the Department's ability to operate in cyberspace, allowing us to execute transparent, well-coordinated, and timely operations. Since last year, I've been focusing on implementing the DoD Cyber Strategy and effectively closing the gaps identified in the subsequent congressionally directed Cyber Posture Review. To this end, I've augmented the expertise and capacity of the cross-functional team of experts in the Office of the Principal Cyber Advisor. We have had a number of successes, including defining the cyber operational forces, initiating the first DoD-wide effort to achieve 100% visibility of networked devices at the operating system level, defining what constitutes the Department's cyberspace operating force, and finalizing readiness standards for the Cyber Mission Force, and finally maturing the concept of layered deterrence. We've also made progress in operationalizing the new, more proactive approach in cyberspace. My guidance from the Secretary is clear. Defending elections is an enduring mission of the Department of Defense. To that end, we are supporting a whole-of-government effort to defend the 2020 elections. The Department, principally through U.S. Cyber Command and NSA's Election Security Group, is complementing other federal departments by leveraging our unique authorities and capabilities and the proactive approach to defend forward. Our new proactive approach in cyberspace is not limited, however, to defending elections. Through outstanding cooperation with the Interagency and the NSC, the Department is able to conduct the full range of missions articulated in the NDS and the DoD Cyber Strategy. Accordingly, our cyber forces are increasingly engaged in cyberspace to promote stability and security and to defend the United States. Our interagency and private sector partners are key to ensuring that DoD can operate and project power in a contested cyber environment. The increasingly provocative activities of key competitors demonstrate how vulnerable the Department is to attacks against the many non-DoD-owned assets that are nevertheless critical to our ability to execute our missions. Their vulnerability means that adversaries could disrupt military operations without actually targeting military networks and systems themselves. To address these challenges, we are strengthening alliances and attracting new partners to take a whole-of-society approach to enabling better security and resilience of key assets. For example, to enable collaboration and unity of effort between DoD and the Department of Homeland Security in support of protecting critical infrastructure and defense-critical assets, we have focused on maturing processes and procedures for cooperation and information sharing and enabling operational collaboration. We have taken a range of actions, including carrying out combined training events with DHS and private sector entities, and collaborating with DHS to exchange cyber threat information with private sector entities. We are also finalizing an agreement with DHS, the federal lead for improving the security and resilience of much of the nation's critical infrastructure, to implement Section 1650 of the FY19 NDAA, to allow DoD to provide DHS with up to 50 cybersecurity personnel on a non-reimbursable basis to enhance cybersecurity cooperation and unity of effort. A key theme of the DoD Cyber Strategy is strengthening international alliances and attracting new partners. In 2019, the Secretary issued new international cybersecurity cooperation guidance to clarify priorities for addressing cyber threats through building the capacities of our international partners and refining responsibilities among DoD components. The guidance directs how DoD components will collaboratively pursue the objectives of the National Defense Strategy, the National Cyber Strategy, and the DoD Cyber Strategy as they apply to security cooperation in cyberspace. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this afternoon. With the 2018 National and DoD Cyber Strategies in place, we are confident that the Department has the right policy, guidance, authorities, and funding levels to support the defense of our nation in cyberspace. I look forward to continue working with you and our critical stakeholders, both inside and outside the U.S. government, to build on this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Rapuano. General Nakasone, you are now recognized.
Chairman Langevin, Ranking Member Stefanik, and distinguished members of the committee. I look forward to discussing the state of U.S. Cyber Command in 2020, its 10-year anniversary from when it was formed. Today, I want to highlight how Cyber Command is providing clear returns on the investment the nation has made in it. In the statement I submitted for the record, I explained how Cyber Command is expanding the competitive space for the Department of Defense. Making this all possible are the contributions made by our military and civilian personnel and the support you and the Department of Defense continue to give us. Let me touch on 3 issues that are at the forefront of our efforts today: elections, readiness, and the people that make up the DoD cyber force. We are 244 days from the 2020 presidential election. My top priority is a safe and secure election that is free from foreign influence. Our strategy at Cyber Command, working with NSA and other partners across the government, is to generate actionable insights, to harden defenses, and to be ready to impose costs if necessary. Malicious actors are trying to test our defenses and our resolve. We are ready for them and for any others who may try to interfere with our democratic processes. I have great confidence in the Cyber Mission Force to execute missions because it is a mission-ready force. 10 years ago, our national leaders envisioned a command that could lead the military's efforts to defend U.S. interests in cyberspace. Today, that vision is a reality. The Cyber Mission Force is highly trained, well-equipped, and manned by our nation's finest men and women, active, Guard, and Reserve military and civilians alike. They provide the Department of Defense and the nation with capacity to conduct defensive activities like rapid incident response, and they stand ready to execute a range of cost-imposing operations. The readiness and operational success of the Cyber Mission Force is a testament to the quality of our people. Recruiting, training, developing, and retaining the best talent is essential for the military to defend the nation in cyberspace. I thank you for the legislative flexibility you have afforded the Department to do just that, such as the creation of the Cyber Accepted Service to fast-track civilian hiring. I continue to pursue creative ways to leverage our nation's best and brightest who want to contribute to our missions, especially through closer partnerships with the National Guard and the Reserves. Distinguished members of the committee, thank you once again for your support of U.S. Cyber Command. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Nakasone. We'll now go to questions, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Let me begin. General Nakasone and Mr. Rapuano, in December, the Secretary of Defense signed a memorandum to the Department that created the new term Cyber Operations Force, which will now encompass the Cyber Mission Force as well as other cyber-specific operational elements. Can you please help us understand how a definition was decided and which forces were determined to be in the Cyber Operations Force, while other operational elements, such as the Air Force's mission defense teams, were excluded?
Chairman, as you're well aware, one of the authorities that has been granted to me is the Joint Force Provider role. That is the ability for us at U.S. Cybercom and myself, particularly, to have cognizance over select elements of our cyber force DoD-wide. We initially began with looking at the cyber force's only 133 teams, our cyber mission force. But as we realized, given our 3 missions to include securing the Department of Defense Information Network, we needed to have greater visibility over a larger force. So that cyber operational force now is not only 133 teams, but it's also the cybersecurity service providers, the people that run the networks for each of the services. And I would offer, why is that important? That's important because we want to have the ability to drive training standards that are equal across all of our services. That's a lesson that we've learned with our cyber mission force. One training standard allows us to be interoperable, drives a higher level of training, drives a higher level of capacity.
Can you talk about which teams were excluded, which were not?
We looked very carefully, Chairman, at each of the service capabilities. And so those cyber elements that were doing a uniquely service-specific job, such as a defensive job for unique weapon systems, we looked at that and we thought that that was a service-retained mission and one that would remain in the cognizance of the services.
So how many people will be part of the new cyber operations force?
Roughly back of the envelope math, Chairman, I would say the 6,187 that are part of our cyber mission force, and then I would say probably double that with regards to our cybersecurity service providers across all 4 services.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So my next question, Cyber Command right now is being utilized today to a greater degree than ever before. Before the various mission sets and the demand signal from the Secretary and the other combatant commanders, do you believe that the approximately 6,100 personnel in the Cyber Mission Force is the right size? And if not, what would be the correct size?
Chairman, as you know, we created the Cyber Mission Force in late 2012 and started building it in 2013. It was designed on 133 teams, given the planning that we had at the time. What has changed since 2013? We are starting now to do election support, an enduring mission, as our Secretary has talked about. We've seen our adversaries have gone from exploitation, disruption, destruction into influence operations. We see the defend forward strategy that our department has now, what we at U.S. Cyber Command are doing as persistent engagement, and we see the corresponding hunt forward missions. Finally, we see across our services the necessity not just to defend networks, but also to be very careful in defending our data and our weapon systems as well. It's a long response to say what we are doing, given all of those missions, is through a series of exercises this year, looking to gather data. What is the right size force that we need? Obviously, as a commander, I would tell you that I never have enough forces, but what I do need is I need the ability to show that in data. And when we come back to that, we'll provide that, obviously, to the department, and the department, through their process, will make a determination on the right size force.
Okay, and can you talk about the zero-based review in the 2020 NDAA and how it will address any existing deficiencies? And also, how quickly are the services prepared to grow the pipeline needed to provide you with the force to fill out the deficiencies between your current strength and your ideal size?
I'd note that we had an exercise not long ago with the Secretary of Defense, with the NDS implementation group, looking at cyber, and went through the whole framework. General Nakasone did an outstanding job briefing. But the issue of our force sizing came up, and there was a lot of emphasis, just as General Nakasone has just explained. This was at the very beginning. 2013 versus 2020 is a whole new paradigm in terms of the evolving threat and in terms of our evolving understanding of the needs. So the Secretary directed at the end of that meeting that we conduct this assessment, which will be supporting the response to the NDA requirement.
Thank you. The ranking member is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm going to yield my time to Rep. Gallagher.
Thank you. And thank you to both of you gentlemen for your active participation in the Cyber Solarium Commission, General Nakasone for making yourself available on numerous occasions to brief the Commission, and Mr. Rapuano for being an active member of the Commission and having an almost perfect attendance record on the Commission's meetings, which I know is hard to achieve, and most members of Congress on the Commission did not even achieve that attendance record. So we're really looking forward to unveiling the final report, and which would not have been possible were it not for the leadership of Chairman Langevin and his active engagement in it. So we hope it's the start of a very robust discussion about not only how far we've come under both of your leadership, but how far we still need to go and where we can improve. And just to kind of follow up on the line of questioning from the chairman, just to put a point on it, General Nakasone, since the Cyber Mission Force was created, it's fair to say the demands on that force have increased. So while we can't say here today that you need to increase the Cyber Mission Force by X number and it's going to cost this amount of dollars, it would be fair to say if we were to do a force structure assessment of the cyber mission force, it would probably come back with an expanded vision for the cyber mission force, correct?
So, Congressman, I would offer that I think as we take a look at the expansion missions, that obviously there will likely be a corresponding look at what the proper size needs to be. If I might, one of the things that I perhaps didn't emphasize enough that I think really has changed tremendously is the fact that the strategies, the policies, the authorities have all changed dramatically, even in the past 24 months. And that has driven a larger op tempo, an op tempo we can talk about in closed session today, because I think you can see, given the right strategy, policies, and authorities, what this force is able to do.
And then just to the extent you can, give us a sense of what your team was doing last night in near real time as you have tried to kind of learn the lessons of 2016. Just give us a taste of what that looks like.
So Super Tuesday yesterday, team comes in at 6 o'clock in the morning. We have teams ready to go. We have the interagency up on one chat system, so we are talking between the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, intelligence community. We have a very good feel from elements of our National Guards in certain states what's ongoing. This is all different than what we were doing in 2018. In 2018, I look back on that, even though very successful, it looks like a pickup game to me, as opposed to what I saw yesterday. Constant communications. Hey, we see indications of a problem here. Do we see any indications in foreign intelligence that might be indicative of someone making a move? No, we don't. This is the type of interaction, rapid. I think it's representative of the domain in which we operate, but I think it's also the idea of we have all of these elements together. National Security Council is online. We have a really good sense of across the interagency and across the whole of government how we operate.
Reclaiming my time, I'm going to yield to Mr. Waltz to give other members an opportunity.
Thank you. Just continuing on the election security piece, we're over 9,000 counties across the United States, different operating systems, different levels of talent, different funding. How do we, so number one, I think it's worth noting that the Guard is the only entity that is in all 9,000 counties across the United States. So, question one: what more can the Guard do from an election security piece? Number two, are we thinking about this in the right way, in the sense of deterrence? Right? Can we possibly bat 1,000? Can we possibly defend perfectly? Or if we have a foreign adversary attacking what we have labeled critical infrastructure, do we need more of a deterrence posture, and what would that look like?
Congressman, if I might begin with what our strategy is in election security group, because I think this is a part of the answer to your question. So what are we doing? We're really operating under three focus efforts right now. One, how do we generate maximum amount of insights on our adversaries? We want to know our adversaries better than they know themselves. Secondly, how do we improve the defense? How do we work with the Department of Homeland Security to ensure election infrastructure is more readily defended? And how do we work closely with the FBI to provide information to social media companies to ensure that they have it? And then thirdly, how do we impose cost? I would offer one of the things that has been to our advantage is we have the experience of 2018, but the other thing is that we're not approaching this episodically. Since the 8th of November in 2018, we've been working this issue, and we are continuing to look at how do we continue to engage with our adversaries in a number of different means to ensure that they understand that we see what they're doing.
I think I know we're out of time. I think we're doing a fantastic job. Things are far better than they were in 2016. But I think we need to make it clear that this is only going to stop when the other side understands that we have the capability and will to impose costs on their system. And that is a sea change. It's kind of like going from counterterrorism in the 90s to post 9/11 in terms of how we're thinking about it. And I yield my time. Thank you,
Yield
Ranking
back.
Member.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Larson is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Nakasone, along those same lines, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I've had 8 town halls since the beginning of the year in my district. And every town hall has its own set of issues. You're in a local area, they bring up local issues and so on. But I will say every town hall I've had, two sets of questions come up. One of them is on election security. And what are we doing to be ready for 2020? So the question I asked yesterday, I was wondering if you could just cover that, is given the fact that some of what we're doing we can't talk about publicly, how do we talk about, how do we communicate to the average citizen who wants to know that the United States is doing its dead level best? What are the actions that we are taking? And what can we describe to folks about the actions we are taking to ensure the integrity of the vote?
Congressman, regarding that question, I think the discussion point of what we're discussing today is so important that, so what is the Department of Defense doing to ensure a safe and secure election? First of all, putting our assets to include our finest intelligence from the National Security Agency operating outside the United States to understand what a variety of adversaries might want to do. Secondly, working across the government. So the Department of Defense working across the government with DHS, with the intelligence community, with other elements to share intelligence, to share insights to improve our defenses, both at the state and local level for DHS as they work with the state and local level, also at the FBI where they're working with the platform owners of social media platforms that are being utilized by our adversaries often to message our population. And the third thing is a range of actions that we are operating today, and we can get into more detail in closed session, to impose costs on our adversary. Any adversary that intends to interfere with the democratic process should know that we are going to take action. We have the authorities, we have the policy, we have the strategy, we have the will, and we've demonstrated that will in 2018.
This might be for both of you. A lot of focus, obviously, on election security in the subcommittee today. With all that you're learning on and relearning and putting in the feedback loop to learn some more about election security, how else are we using these young women and men who are in Cyber Command? Are we creating an expertise in election security as well as making sure they have the expertise in supporting combatant commanders for other things? Or are we starting to create not divisions in a bad way, but sub-agencies within Cyber Command who have expertise? How are you approaching that?
When we stood up our cyber mission forces, we had 3 missions that they were dedicated to, as you recall. One was defend our networks, 2 was to support combatant commanders, and the third piece is to defend our nation in cyberspace. Primarily, we are using the element, which is the Cyber National Mission Force, a unit I know very well, I commanded previously, as the action arm for defending the nation in cyberspace with regards to elections. I don't think it overly specializes them. In fact, what I would tell you is we're seeing influence operations across a spectrum of different actors, and so being able to understand this, being able to work elections is pretty important for us.
I would just add to that, in the point that General Nakasone made earlier, this truly is a whole of government and even a whole of society exercise. And one of the greatest shifts that we've seen over time, even in the last year, is the whole of government enterprise has matured dramatically. First, you have a much better appreciation for the threat. The perception of the threat is much more palpable today than I think it's ever been before. Secondly, you've seen agencies and departments really up their game. You can look at the Department of Homeland Security and CISA. You can look at other elements of DHS, but the FBI and Justice Department, they bring unique authorities and capabilities, and they've added significantly. So it's not about Cyber Command now doing things that aren't military missions. They're using their military skill sets, and they're focused on defending forward, getting at the source of the insult, and they're supporting through intelligence and warning, and in some cases defense support to civil authorities, those civil agencies requesting support. So it gets back to that rapid maturation loop that we've seen in just 1 year. Yeah. Thank you, or 2 years, sorry.
2 years, yeah. Thank you, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Mr. Conaway is recognized.
Can you yield to Bacon, please? Bacon, can you yield to Don Bacon?
Mr. Bacon is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you to both. I appreciate you being here. I got a related question to the War Powers Resolution coming up. It was voted out of the Senate. It implies that we're doing continuing operations against Iran, which I dispute. We did a one-time kinetic operation against General Soleimani, who was in Iraq doing more planning, someone who killed 609 Americans. But here's my concern. So this will limit kinetic operations, but I think it also says, it doesn't just say kinetic, it implies any military operations. And what I wonder about, what is the impact on Cyber Command if this Four Powers resolution passes, both houses becomes law?
I don't see it impacting Cyber Command at all, but I'll turn to General Nakasone.
I don't either, Congressman. I see us continuing to operate below the level of armed conflict. I have all the authorities and the policies that I need to continue to operate.
Thank you. Secondly, there's 2 articles that talked about our successful operations in the 2018 election, but I don't think the voters really have that, know much about it. What can you say as to your success in the 2018 election to foil what the Russians were doing?
I think we can say a lot more in a closed hearing, but again, I'll turn.
And whatever you can publicly say. I think it's helpful for our citizens to know, though, to the best extent that we can, because this is a success, and it's not really well known.
So Congressman, while I won't speak to the articles, what I will speak to is the fact that what was different in 2018. What was different in 2018 is, again, we had the strategy, policies, and authorities that we needed to carry out our missions against an adversary that was attempting to influence our population. Secondly, we had the will to act, the will from policymakers and certainly all the way down, and we acted. And the third thing is that we have a very, very highly trained force that's very, very capable.
Thank you. A third question. When I came in 3 years ago, there was a discussion of trying to dual hat, or not dual hat, put 2 different 4-stars, one for NSA, one for cyber. I thought it was a mistake because I know our teams are combined NSA and cyber, particularly for cyber attack. It's definitely a synergistic team there. I think it works well to have a single 4-star with 2 different 3-stars, but is there any more discussions on separating with 2 different 4-stars, or is this the organizational construct for the long term, which I hope it is?
Any decision on the dual hat arrangement and changes to the dual hat arrangement would really be the considered judgment collectively of the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the Director of National Intelligence. So that certainly is a possibility, but right now there is not that is not a focus in terms of what leadership is looking at with regard to our cyber activities.
I hope it's not, because I think it's useful to have a common direction for both the cyber side and the NSA side on these teams, and having a single 4-star provides that unified effort. To have 2 different 4-stars, it could work. It's personality dependent. But I also think it's a recipe for disaster. So I think we have the right construct now. We have 6,100 people that are serving in the cyber mission force. Is that the right size? Is this working?
So certainly it's working. I think whether or not it's the right size for the future, that's part of the issue that we're going to take on this year through a series of different exercises to get the data to take a look at what's the right size force given the missions and the requirements from the department.
One final question, since I have about a minute half left. Obviously, I'm interested in this entire topic. I think you guys do great work. You know, in the Air Force, they combine their cyber and EW into a common command under Air Combat Command. But at the combatant command level, we have cyber under yourself, sir, and then we have also EW under STRATCOM. Is this organization division, is it working? Or do we need to relook at that?
Let me address 16th Air Force first, because I'm a huge fan of what General Goldfein has done, bringing together AF Cyber, which was the 24th Air Force, along with the 25th. Under one commander, 10 wings, able to do cyber, IO, EW, intel. Why is that important? Because rapidly, the commander of 16th Air Force, AF Cyber, can move with a number of different opportunities to get at adversaries. And what I just listed there are all non-kinetic means that have tremendous capabilities against our adversaries. So my hat's off to the Air Force.
You don't see any need to make any changes with the EW cyber at the combatant level?
Well, again, I think this is something the Joint Staff will continue to study.
Okay.
we're a learning organization. We're a work in progress, and I think that as we continue to mature, is probably take a look as what's the right laydown of all the non-kinetic elements.
I personally have a position. I was just curious for yours, so I thank you.
There are a lot of trades, obviously, and the more time that we have in the hole in terms of operating in each of these areas, particularly the new warfighting domains, cyber, space, we're going to develop a better appreciation for where the synergies are, and as importantly, where the organizational strengths are in terms of what our structure and business process is.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and thank you to both these great leaders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got some really basic questions. I'll field both of them. Take the time that you have to devote to it however you want. Army, a new accession officer into cyber. Can you tell me about how you bring that officer in, what kind of training they go through, the assignments they need to be an effective, let's say, 06 in the Cyber Command? And then the second question I have is, can you assess publicly, and I know that there have been some reports recently about sort of like your storage capacity, your ability to exploit data, to capture adversary information and analyze it. Can you talk about the infrastructure you have and give me an assessment whether you've got what you need? Because you take in a lot of information every day. And do you have what you need to evaluate it, exploit it, act on it, et cetera?
Congressman, the question that you ask is one that I have tremendous amount of interest because our number one priority at U.S. Cyber Command is our people. And let me talk a little bit about accessions, particularly for our Army, because I know that best. So two major places you're going to come if you're a cyber officer, either from the United States Military Academy or ROTC. I believe that cyber is the top, if not close to the top, requested branch across Army new lieutenants coming in. This is a popular branch that very, very talented people want to get into. We accept about 120 a year, if I'm not mistaken. And from that, your initial assignment is going to be at Fort Gordon, Georgia for basic officer leadership course, where you have both the technical, the tactical, the leadership abilities that are going to be trained as you serve there. First assignment, likely in one of four places: Fort Meade, Maryland, Fort Gordon, Georgia, Texas, or Hawaii. You are likely going to be leading one of our offensive or defensive teams. So very similar leadership construct that you're obviously very familiar with, but it also builds in terms of as you get more proficient, as you're able to show your technical prowess, as you're able to lead soldiers, then greater responsibilities would occur. In terms of the data, we have, through your strong support in the committee here, a joint cyber warfighting architecture that is being funded right now. One of the key elements of that is increasing our data. It's called the Unified Platform. That is now starting to come online, and over the next year will be really the central focus in terms of building this warfighting architecture that allows us to store data and then be able to conduct operations worldwide.
Answer will be in the skiff in 2337.
Okay.
Do you need anything from me?
No.